Welcome back to movementprofessional.com. So today I want to go over a couple exercises that we can do while sitting in a chair to work on caring for our feet. So one of the first exercises we can do is just use the ground as a platform to do some heel raises. Now when we're doing these heel raises, we're not necessarily thinking about building strength in the calf or the soleus muscle, but we're actually using the ground to help improve the dorsiflexion we have in the great toe, and then also help us appreciate the mechanics of pronation versus supination of the foot. So if we think about the difference between the two, generally the more we put pressure towards the inside of the foot, we're able to get to pronation, and the more we are towards the outside of the foot, it's more supination. On the other side of things, it would be if we're lifting our heel a little bit more, or we're plantar flexing the foot or pointing the toe, we're going to be a little bit more towards supination. And if we're dorsiflexing, pulling the toes towards the shin, we're moving more towards pronation. So when we do a heel raise, we're kind of doing a combination of both. So what we want to do is really supinate by elevating the heel, but at the end of that movement, we want to add some pronation by making sure that we're finishing with pressure in the ball of the big toe. All right, so this helps us really kind of appreciate that we're fully propelling off the ground, like that. We want to make sure that we finish through the inside of the foot, and it also helps us get this dorsiflexion, which is this little crease right in the great toe there, okay? Because that's going to be part of gait when we walk and we roll over through gait, that we're making sure that we're keeping our foot, knee, and hip in alignment. If there is a limitation in this big toe, which there is for many of us, we start to compensate by turning the foot out, turning the foot in, by having the knee cave in, having the knee cave out. The hip ends up doing a lot of funky things. So this rollover onto this big toe is pretty important. But this also becomes useful for things like jumping and just propelling off the ground. Is if we can just get our body to feel the inside of the foot at the highest point or the peak of our heel raise, it becomes quite useful. So once we get into this position, we're not just going to hang out here. I want to actually do a little bit of strength work. So I want to make sure that I have my heel as high as it can be. I want to sort of sit towards the front of the chair, so I'm loading some weight into the ball of the big toe. And then I'm going to do some isometrics, would just be directing some muscle contractions. So if I pull my toes more up towards my shin here, I'm contracting the muscles on the top of the foot. All right, so I'm basically pulling myself more into that dorsiflexion. I'm going to hold that for about 10 seconds and then relax, and then see if I can adjust my feet to get deeper into that heel raise, deeper into that dorsiflexion of the great toe. Then I'm going to go in the other direction and gently curl my toes into the ground, which is going to strengthen the muscles more on the bottom side of the foot. Hang out there for about 10 seconds. And then relax, readjust, try to keep fighting for that elevation. Spread the toes, pull the toes towards the shin for about 10 seconds, and then relax, and then curl the toes and relax. At any point, if I start to get too fatigued, I can drop out of that, come back into it, and repeat the process. All right, so we can set a timer for this and do it for about 2 minutes. If we're just working in an office chair and we can take our shoes off, we can just do it periodically throughout the course of the day, like 1 or 2 sets of 10 in each direction, relax, and just keep coming back to it. It's more about the focus and the concept of what we're trying to work on than it is about exactly how many reps you do or how much time you do, but that we're actually trying to improve this great toe dorsiflexion, feeling that we're able to create pressure through the ball of the big toe on both sides, and just noticing how difficult it might be at first to do that, and how difficult it might be to actually get the heels to elevate without the compensation of the ankles kicking out, which is usually the most common one seen. All right, so that becomes a pretty important one to do, very simple. The other thing we can do is go in the other direction, which would just be a simple toe raise. And as we do a toe raise, the compensations that we're going to typically see is we lift up and the feet want to go out like that, right? Which is a version of pronation, but we're also going to get this tibial rotation outward. So for the sake of this drill, we want to try to keep our feet pointing forward and just keeping them parallel, bring the toes up towards the shins. As we do that, trying to spread the toes actively becomes quite useful. And then when we put the feet back down, we want to think about the ball of the foot touching the ground before the toes touch the ground, just so we can kind of get this separation of moving from the ball of the foot versus moving from the toes. All right, and then when we come up, we can try to lift the toes first so that the ball of the foot stays down. And I like to think of this as like four corners of the feet, two sides of the ball of the foot, two sides of the heel staying on the ground. Once we get that, then we can lift the ball of the foot off the ground and try to aim the middle of the foot with the middle of the knee as we come up. And then we go back down, ball of the foot touches first, then toes touch. All right, once we do that a little bit, we can make that a little bit harder by walking the feet more underneath the chair so that the knees are coming more in front of the toes, and then we kind of do the same thing. Ball of the foot stays on the ground first, and then the more we bring the heels underneath, the harder it is going to be to lift the ball of the foot, but we just do as much as we can. And what we're doing is we're strengthening these muscles in the front, the anterior tibialis, and just the muscles in the shin there that dorsiflex the ankle. And we're trying to build strength, but we're also trying to direct the force more into that range of motion of dorsiflexion. All right, so we can do that for several reps for several minutes, about 10 seconds on, relax in between, try to improve that range of motion. All right, and then the other thing we can do from here, from any of these positions, it's going to be easiest with the feet more out in front of us, is we just work from that position where our toes are lifted, four corners of the feet are in contact with the ground, and then we try to separate out the movement of the inside of the foot from the outside of the foot. So I'm going to bring the big toe down, and as I bring my big toe down, I'll have more contact with the inside ball of the foot, and I'm going to tend to lose a little bit of pressure on the outside, but I don't want to completely lose the pressure on the pinky toe side so that my ankle inverts like that. I want to keep some contact with all four corners of the foot. When the big toe goes down, I'm just going to be biasing more to the inside, then I bring it all back up. Then I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to bring the outer toes down, which is going to bias a little bit more pressure towards supination, towards the outside of the feet. And my big toe is going to stay up, but I want to keep the ball of the big toe in contact with the ground. And then I come back to this base position where all the toes are up. And then I just keep going back and forth. Big toe comes down, outer toes stay up, bring it back, outer toes go down, big toe stays up. All right, and then again, it gets harder if I inch my feet underneath because now I'm more in a dorsiflex position. And I want to see if I can do that from these greater angles of dorsiflexion. As we bring the heels under, one of the ways we can think about this is it gets us closer to the ankle mobility we would need during a deep squat. So it's a useful thing to practice when you're in a chair, to just keep trying to bring your feet under. And even if your heels actually start to ride up a little bit, that's fine as long as we're fighting to push the heels down and pull the toes up. We're building strength in the direction of our limitation. So if we are spending a bunch of time sitting in a chair, we have the ability to do this. It's a lot of time that we could be working towards improving the mobility of the feet. All right, so once we have those exercises down, the third thing I would recommend is crossing the leg every now and then. And if your shoes are off, if it's not too gross to you, intertwine your fingers and your toes. All right, and this does a lot of good. So most of the time, if we're boxed in a shoe, our toes are going to tend to be closer together, and we're going to lose the ability to spread them a little bit. So this is just some great foot care to get in the habit of whenever your shoes are off, you're sitting and you can cross your leg, and you can do this certainly while sitting on the ground too, is that we cross the fingers between the toes. And first thing is just see how deep into the webbing can you get the fingers into the toes, because oftentimes it can become quite difficult. This tissue gets quite restricted, and as you try to get the fingers down, it kind of hurts a bit, and it just feels like it won't let you get there. So gradually over time, being able to get the finger all the way to the base of the webbing between the toes is quite useful in itself. Now once we're there, we sort of have a lock in place here where the toes are spread. Now we're going to create some motion around that. So we can just use this to circle the ankle a little bit. We can use it as a little bit of a resistance. So I'm going to push the ball of my foot into my hand, and that's creating a little isometric for the muscles on the calf side. And then I can also resist as I pull up. As I go into more dorsiflexion, I can pull down and resist and strengthen there. I can use the thumb side to work more towards inversion and just even resist trying to go into eversion in the other direction. So I could do isometrics with this grip here, but the key is that I have this more spread toe position. And this is going to be something that if it becomes a habit for you, your toes are going to get a lot more motion than they're used to, and that is a huge part of trying to prevent foot pain over time, or just a deterioration of the feet over time, right? Like we oftentimes we're neglecting them. Our feet we use them to walk, we put a lot of load through them, we put a sock and a shoe on, and we sort of forget about the fact that we have movement between our toes, and we actually have a lot of tissue between the bones of our feet that start to get compressed over time. So just having a habit of taking the shoes off, getting the fingers between them, doing different movements there, what you'll notice, and I notice it right now, as soon as I take my fingers out, I could actually see daylight between my toes, which isn't going to be the case once I take my shoes off. So if I do that on a regular basis, I'm going to at least maintain the spacing between my toes, if not improve it. And it's a dynamic process. Every time I put a shoe on, if I'm on my feet for a while, things are going to get a little closer together. So I want you to think of this as like hygiene work, where like you brush your teeth a couple times a day. Well, maybe you get your fingers between your toes a couple times a day. All right, and I know that some people may find that disgusting. Just put some hand sanitizer on afterwards, but I highly recommend it. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, you go to movementprofessional.com. I'll see you next time.